Wagner is done, it is over for them, because the last remaining representatives of this private military company were eliminated in Avdiivka. At the same time, NATO is about to provide a life-changing support to Ukraine, and more than 90,000 soldiers about to start their exercises. And ultimately, Ukraine was able to attack a major Russian city, St. Petersburg. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. So, today we have a pretty ridiculous one. I mean, that's why it's the name. Ridiculous Russian propaganda. So long story short, there is this one small town somewhere in Russia, even I don't know where it is. And some local residents decided to do a small pawn shop, second-hand market, where they started to sell used things which were used by Ukrainians in the zone of this special military operation. And they said that these are basically just the regular things that Ukrainians use daily today, such as, for example, license plates, books, passports, some medals and awards. And honestly, you know what? I'm pretty surprised that the Russian propaganda did not add something their own, something like restricted, prohibited literature, some satanistic and Nazistic symbols, and some things that you use to summon demons during ritual. Because according to them, this is exactly what day-to-day life of regular Ukrainians look like. Or to be honest, it might be a little bit too early to tell, because the video was just released, and I think I captured it pretty early, so maybe, just maybe in the future, Russian propaganda will unleash its full potential. So, let's see. But okay, as always, jokes aside, now let's talk about this life-changing support that NATO might offer Ukraine in the near future. And then I'm gonna give you an update from the east of Ukraine, the attack against St. Petersburg, and the last remaining Wagner soldiers being eliminated. And first of all, one of the representatives of the Rammstein group of 50 countries, the Prime Minister of Estonia, Kaja Kallas, she suggested that each country member should pledge approximately only 0.25% of its GDP to Ukraine, which will amount to approximately $131 billion support to Ukraine annually, and this will be a significant assistance to this country in its fight against Russia, while not affecting severely the national budgets of its member. At the same time, NATO at the level of commander-of-chiefs, they were able to meet also with the Ukrainian representatives, but unfortunately Valery Zaluzhny was not able to participate personally. That is why he sent his trusted advisor, Serhiy Salkutsan, who was representing Ukraine in this meeting. And I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but shortly after this meeting, a training military exercises of more than 90,000 NATO soldiers were announced. Next we have the country of France, which is about to pledge approximately 40 long-range missiles called Scalp, which are basically the equivalent of long-range attack MSs. And besides that, 78 self-propelled artillery systems called Caesar will also be produced by France and given to Ukraine. Then we also have a country of Germany, which is pledging more than 7 billion euros to Ukraine in 2024. And as you can see from this new updated graph, Germany became the second largest financial supporter of Ukraine right after the United States of America. But Ukrainians, they do not also just sit and do nothing. They also continue to develop their own military industry. And such as, for example, right here is the reportedly cumulative cluster munition for their drones, and even potentially this is the video of such of this ammunition already being used along the front lines. And in the meantime, Russians use these inflatable decoy targets, which to be honest do not look that much real, especially if you're looking at them from above, and if there's a slight wind they're gonna start shaking and wiggling left and right, so it's gonna be pretty distinguishable which ones are real or not. Because in comparison to Ukrainians, they were actually producing the, let's call them real decoys with the metal parts, with the wooden parts, which were almost indistinguishable from the actual real equivalents. Now let's talk about one of the major topics of the video, is that Ukrainians were able to attack Russian St. Petersburg, located, as you can see, extremely far from the front lines. Then we're gonna talk about the situation in the east of Ukraine, and finally about the last remaining Wagner soldiers being eliminated. But first of all, guys, as always, can you please help me? And you can do it by simply subscribing to my channel and liking this video. That's all I can ask you to do. So thank you so much. We're getting very close to 240,000, and your support, as always, is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. You can also follow me on Instagram. I'm still traveling to see how I live outside of YouTube. The link is down below. And so yes, speaking about the attack of Ukrainians against St. Petersburg, there are several confirmed reports that this actually happened. The first one was obviously coming from the defense intelligence of Ukraine, and then Russians also said that they heard some loud noises. According to the Ukrainian side, they were able to destroy a couple of terminals or oil and gas reservoirs. And according obviously to the Russian side, every single drone was intercepted and there was no significant damage done. And at the same time, some other drones were intercepted in Moscow region, and obviously a couple of them were also intercepted in Belgorod, which basically means that most likely the drone that reached all the way to St. Petersburg, it could have been launched from the territory of Ukraine. And just take a look, the distance that it has to cover is extremely long. So the effectiveness of Russian air defense system is, I would say, pretty much non-existent. And on the other hand, Russians also continue to attack the territory of Ukraine. And right here is the statistics of the Ukrainian air defense, and they were able to intercept 22 out of 33 Russian Shahed drones. But now we move back to the actual east of Ukraine. And first of all, since we spoke about the new military equipment, right here is the allegedly brand new Russian heavy flamethrower called TOS-2 Tosachka, which has been spotted along Luhansk front lines. And the fighting still continues along the eastern front lines, specifically next to Crimea front line, even though neither of the sides are advancing significantly for a very long time. And such as, for example, right here is the combat footage from one of the forest areas. Then it was another attempt of Russians to assault the position of Ukrainians also along the Luhansk front lines. Such as, for example, right here you can see a Russian infantry fighting vehicle called BMP-3 attacking, or at least trying to attack, Ukrainians. No results, because later on it was the response of Ukrainians, and they were the ones who successfully destroyed this military target. And then, getting closer to Bakhmut frontline, to Kurdyumivka, this is also where Russians tried to advance. And as a result of this failed offensive, Ukrainians were able to destroy at least one tank and 2 more infantry fighting vehicles. The video right here, unfortunately, just like the previous ones, I had to censor in order to comply with YouTube guidelines. But as always, you can see fully uncensored footage on my Patreon, the link is down below. As we go along the eastern front line, even more videos of Russian, allegedly modern combat tanks being destroyed by simple Ukrainian drones, they start appearing pretty much daily at this point. It just even looks like that the new tanks that Russia produces are made literally of paper, papier-mâché, carton and maybe some wood to make them sturdy, right? And then going even more down to the south to Stepove, located to the northwest of Avdiivka. Here is another combat footage, the first-person view of Ukrainian soldiers fighting there. And you will be able to see a Ukrainian infantry fighting vehicle Bradley successfully eliminating Russian targets in this city. And then another already drone perspective video also from Stepove appeared, where also Ukrainian Bradley, maybe even the very same one, is attacking Russian tanks. And you will be able to see the effectiveness of this machine. I'm talking about Bradley, obviously. And Russians said that Russian T-90M was able to deflect all of these attacks. There was absolutely no significant damages and the machine was fully operational. But what they forgot is that there is a second part of the same video, where Russian infantry literally abandons uncontrollable tank which is just spinning and then just stopping with no movement at all, and they try to run away as far as possible. So the statement of Russians that this machine is suffering barely any damages, I don't think that's the true one. And yes guys, just a couple of last words from the east before I talk about Wagner soldiers. Just give me a couple more minutes. And so then is another video already from Avdiivka itself, and this is one of the very first video, at least the one which I saw personally, where Ukrainians are using anti-tank missiles called Javelin. And you can see that the projectile just approaches the target and then it just starts to literally go down as a ballistic metallic cylinder. This weapon is extremely effective. And because the losses of Russians, specifically also in the military vehicles, are so high in the east, including in Avdiivka, recently a new footage of Russians using literally a armored personal carrier BTR-50, which was developed, guess when? In 1950s. They started using these machines, which are already 74 plus years old. They started using them in the modern warfare. I do not think they're gonna last long, but it is better than just running across open field with no protection at all. Speaking about the Russian perspective, obviously. And even though, like mentioned previously, it does not feel like that either of the sides are advancing significantly anywhere, the number of combat activities, it started to go up, unfortunately, once again. Because as you can see from this graph, the combat clashes, they increased specifically because of the situation in the east, significantly. And this temporarily slowed down, which happened last 2-3 weeks, it was mainly because of Christmas and New Year holidays. But nevertheless, in the last 24 hours, Ukrainians were able to destroy 7 concentration of Russian forces, 3 control points, 7 air defense systems, 3 radio stations, 2 artillery firing positions, and 2 ammunition warehouses. And unfortunately, the best example that the intensity of combat increased recently is the city of Avdiivka, which, as you can see right here from this video, is pretty much already destroyed to the ground, but only in the first 2 to 3 weeks of this new year alone, it has been attacked at least 250 times by Russians. In comparison, in the previous year altogether, the number of similar attacks was estimated to be at 146. And obviously, since the number of combat operations it increased, we might expect some good or bad news, unfortunately, in the near future. And you know what? To be honest, one of them already right. And long story short, in Avdiivka front line, it looks like that the very last remaining Wagner soldiers were eliminated. According to the Ukrainians fighting in this area, these were indeed Wagner soldiers because of their emblems and other identification, and most likely this was just these very few last remaining units who were fighting in Ukraine back from the times with Prigozhin, and who were just relocated back and forth, maybe even between the east and the south or just along the east, but eventually they did end up in Avdiivka, where they met, where they just fell asleep. And as you can see, there was not a single news about Wagner for the last several months, which does also indirectly confirms that yes, the presence of this private military company in Ukraine is extremely little or pretty much non-existent at this point, so their elimination pretty much puts an end, which puts a one big period in the history of Wagner participation in Ukrainian war. At the same time, if you remember from previous year, the very last also Wagner soldiers were approximately signing their annual contracts around this time, in 2023, if I'm not mistaken, in January-February of last year. So we are exactly 1 year ahead of these times, which basically means even if there are still Wagner soldiers fighting in Ukraine who just do not do much impact anymore anyways, their contracts are about to expire anyways. And obviously without Prigozhin, this private military company was not able to achieve anything significant besides just being present in Ukraine. But once again, since today, since this elimination, we, I would say, can put an end to Wagner in this war. pretty much that's it. It is over for Wagner. But of course, if I do hear something about them in the future, I will definitely make a video about this as well. And if you don't want to miss it, guys, you already know what to do. Simply subscribe to my channel. We're getting very close to 240,000, so let's hit this mark all together. Thank you so much, my patrons, for your support, and see you tomorrow.